Look, Enchanted Portals has had it pretty rough. It launched a Kickstarter that failed, partly due to articles and tweets and posts about how it was a Cuphead ripoff and a clone and unoriginal.
We're just clones, sir. We're meant to be expendable.
Then, after going dark for a while, they released some new footage, which sparked another controversy. It seems they had made the error of putting some chickens in Native American outfits in their game. What's worse is they were dressed in historically inaccurate stuff. You know, things like wearing war bonnets and using a bow and arrow and having anything to do with buffalo. You know, things that just never happened. Now this was quickly remedied by replacing the Native American aesthetic with the white cowboy aesthetic. So in the end, all was well.
Wait a minute!
I didn't really know what to think of this whole thing at the time, but I had many comments from people claiming Native American heritage weighing in, saying that the boss wasn't offensive at all, it's just a cartoon, they liked the representation, or that they didn't care either way. You guys let me know your thoughts on the whole thing down below in the comments, but for me, at this point, it really seemed like outrage that sparked a worse solution than even the original problem. After this event, they went silent again. You wouldn't be crazy for considering the project dead. Until all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they announced a shadow drop release date right when Starfield was launching in the middle of the busiest gaming month of the year, with next to no marketing leading up to it. Ladies and gentlemen, even if you are not prolific in marketing, this should seem like a bad move, and I was rightfully suspicious, but I love Cuphead and I wanted some good run-and-gun boss shooting action, so obviously I grabbed the game. I went into Enchanted Portals telling myself I won't compare it to Cuphead, because that would be unfair. It didn't have the budget, the support, or even the mass appeal of that game. A massive company like Microsoft didn't swoop in and invest all that money in Enchanted Portals like they did with Cuphead. This was just a small team trying to make something with next to no budget. But wow, this game feels like the developers have never even played Cuphead. People play Cuphead for mainly 3 reasons: the gameplay, the difficulty, and the animation, aesthetic, whole thing. Without outright comparing to Cuphead, I want to go ahead and tell you why Enchanted Portals fails in all 3 categories. I've always been pro take inspiration. I'm a massive Crowsworn enjoyer. I like it when any game takes inspiration from my favorites. So for Enchanted Portals, I had the same mindset. Granted, they didn't have much funding or experience, so I wasn't expecting something as outstanding and indie game defining as Cuphead was. But I was at least expecting a competent video game that could give some hours of enjoyment and some good boss fights. Well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it's official. Enchanted Portals is a crime. If I had to guess, the last game these developers played before making this was Pong, or something really old. You know, the ones made while game developers were still figuring things out. What do I mean by this? Enchanted Portals suffers from so many things that game development as a whole has found solutions for. It's obvious it's a low budget production, and that's fine, they could have made this work. But there are so many basic ass things that just do not work in this game. For example, the save system. It just doesn't exist. I beat the first 2 worlds, put the game down for the night, and the next day I realized I had to do it all over again. There wasn't save data to lose, because save data itself doesn't exist. The control scheme is terrible. I mean, it has everything you would expect in a 2D platformer boss rush game. Run, jump, air dash, parry, shoot, but it feels so bad to control. I refuse to believe they had anyone test their game before launch. Or if they did, the game testers must have lied directly to their faces with the feedback. It's floaty, unresponsive at times. The jump has no air control, which means if you overshoot a platform, screw you. And the jump arc never lands where you would expect, so double screw you. The air dash has a delay, the hitboxes feel terrible, there's no precision. Oh, the game has rebinding of keys. 90% of indie games or even AAA games, good or bad, can never seem to have this feature on launch, but somehow this hot mess actually has that function. But of course it's broken. It doesn't remember your bindings after exiting the game, so you have to rebind every time you want to play. The game consists of worlds, each a run and gun level and a boss fight. I need to camp out on these levels, my guys. I am actually speechless. The first level had me laughing my ass off. The tutorial has images of what you were supposed to do, but not which button does the thing. It's literally a straight line, occasionally a wall to block you, some death pits, and it just spams enemies at you. These enemies can be normal or color-coded to each of your 3 weapon types, red, blue, or green. And these levels go on forever with no checkpoints. Like, I mean literally minutes of walking to the right with no elevation change or anything. And on top of all of that, they are randomly generated. But it's not interesting generation, it's more like each level has 2 or 3 segments, and these are randomly in a row. But the segments are literally just a few assets and spammed enemies. On top of that, if you try and rush through the level, the enemies don't despawn, so you end up with a cluster cluck of projectile and enemy spam, while you use the horrible controls to try and bum rush the ending. Is the game difficult? It depends. The run and gun levels are annoying, overly long, and if you want to rush through them to get to the good parts, then it becomes a difficult slog. If you take your time, take out each enemy, and slowly move forward, the difficulty is removed, and it just becomes a boring slog. The boss fights have some great ideas, but their difficulty doesn't come from attacks or movesets, but rather the horrible controls and hitboxes. Most fights, it's better to just find blind spots and deal damage, ignoring the boss moveset entirely, and that's the worst kind of boss design. People who play these games want to engage with your boss fights, that's where the whole fun is. You also have 3 difficulties, and they are Bethesda difficulties. Easiest lets you take 6 hits before you die, normal is 3, and insane is 1 life, no health regen or pickups allowed per world. There is no change to enemy amount, boss attacks, or stuff like that. And I don't know why anyone would want to beat insane, to put themselves through that hell, but it honestly might be entertaining to watch. And the animation, it's like half done. I didn't really expect the mind-blowing phase transitions of Cuphead or something like that. But when you beat a boss phase, there's no animation at all. Usually just a slideshow where the screen gets washed over. The general animation is fine, but the art style has nothing going for it. I think the intent was to go for a fairy tale storybook comic book aesthetic, but this ended up being a problem, as there's really not enough shading or depth to help separate background from foreground or characters from everything else, which makes the controls feel worse because it's harder to gauge where you're even going. The music is actually one of the few positives I have for this game. It's not going to win awards, but there's honestly some solid tracks that fit the theme of the stage, so props to the music artist. The sound design is honestly a meme. It really does feel like at the last second they got stock sounds and placed them but forgot to place some. So it feels like half of the game's enemies and effects don't have any sound at all. And my personal favorite detail is you can actually hear when the level or boss song loops. Like it's a hard audio cut. It's hilarious. The sound design is such a monumental failure, it's honestly impressive. I actually recommend checking out some no commentary gameplay just to experience the audio bliss. The worst part is it feels like there's a good game buried somewhere in all of this mess. The boss designs and ideas are actually all pretty great. The Space Cow is fun, the Frog Prince is a great theme for a boss, the replaced Native American with American Cowboy boss is, well, it's what the people wanted, I guess. If it wasn't for the terrible gameplay and controls, there could be some great fun. But the run and gun levels are honestly just trash. I refuse to believe even the devs themselves like them. They really should have just thrown the levels in the dumpster and focused on the bosses. I don't know, the run and gun levels are seriously just wasted energy. The only good idea in them is the color-coded enemies, but it absolutely does not work here. It would be cool for a few actually designed encounters, but in these random levels it just bogs down the pace even more, as you shoot endless amounts of non-threatening goons. In a way, this is actually very similar to the Gleamlight and Hollow Knight situation. You see, Gleamlight took inspiration from Hollow Knight. Some people called it a clone or a ripoff, but the fact that matters is, when it came out and to this day, it was in a similar state to Enchanted Portals. Horrible game design and controls, bad marketing and support, and a bad release. But here's the hard truth. Gleamlight was not a bad game because it copied Hollow Knight. Gleamlight was a bad game because it was a bad game. No amount of inspiration can cover up horrible controls, terrible level design, and bad gameplay. Enchanted Portals took clear inspiration from Cuphead, that much is obvious, but that has absolutely no bearing on the problems Enchanted Portals suffers from. I could make a game that is clearly inspired by Bloodborne, but if I have no idea how to make a good game or even just good gameplay feel, no amount of it being like Bloodborne is going to make people like it. Crowsworn has so much support and interest because on top of its obvious inspirations, it has the good gameplay and game design to support it. Unfortunately, Enchanted Portals does not. The one thing it does have going for it is that there are so many good games out or releasing soon that it will probably be largely ignored and forgotten. Who knows, the devs might commit and put in the work to make this a good game, and they have my full support in doing so. But until then, Sea of Stars is amazing. I highly recommend grabbing it for you indie game lovers out there.